Rediscover your past by digitizing your family's memories with Legacy Box. Watch until the end of this video to find out more about preserving your legacy, and then visit legacybox.com/recollection. Who among us doesn't remember the days when we had to memorize phone numbers? It certainly tested our memory, keeping track of our home phone number, friends' numbers, and select family members. Knowing these by heart was a necessity, especially when it came to making any phone call, and most importantly, if you were stranded by a payphone. It's hard to believe that we once kept all of these numbers stored right in our head, while all the other important phone numbers were written down on a list somewhere by the telephone. Back then, we just didn't have the luxury of knowing who was calling, so there was no screening our phone calls. When the phone rang, we answered it, no matter who was on the other end. And taking down messages for the other people in the household was all part of the process. It was polite and helpful to the person calling to ensure they would get a return phone call. No call would go to waste, because who knew what important message might be on the other end. GPS and digital maps may have made our lives easier, but let's not forget the satisfaction of unfolding a paper map and plotting a course to somewhere new. Reading a paper map took skill and patience to study every inch of the map, plus be able to navigate in real time. When traffic, construction, or roadblocks popped up, you had to plot a new course on the fly. It wasn't easy, but at least you could never get lost. Road trips back then added an element of adventure, especially when you had someone riding along to help navigate. Sewing used to be a practical skill that was taught both at home and at school. Prior to mass-produced clothing available at every turn, many women would make their own clothes by using patterns and a trusty sewing machine. The sewing machine used to be a very important household device, and it got plenty of use over the years, and then it was probably passed down to you. Mending clothes, altering them, or even sewing your own shirts and trousers was a reflection of how we used to be much more self-sufficient. Not to mention, it saved a lot of money. Cursive writing, with its elegant swirls and loops, was a hallmark of our generation. It's a style that added a personal touch to both letters and documents, and was seen as a much quicker method for writing things down. The art of writing in cursive was something we grew up doing, first by seeing our parents write, and then officially learning how to do it in the early years of elementary school. Not only did it improve our fine motor skills, but it just looked more graceful, and seemed to carry with it a bit more of your own personality, which is something that text messaging just doesn't convey. Remember your first car? Learning to drive was a rite of passage as a teenager, and many of us learned to drive using a manual transmission. Some cars had a 3-on-the-tree column shift, while others had a stick shift with 4 on the floor. Driving back then required both feet and both hands, plus the wherewithal to know when to change gears. While automatic cars have become the norm, knowing how to drive a stick shift was a valuable skill and a true connection to the driving experience. Balancing your checkbook was taught to us because it was the foundation for financial responsibility. Our income and all of our expenses were reviewed at least once a month to keep things accurate. This skill taught us the value of money and helped us to live within our means, which is something missing in today's world. With credit and debit cards making spending easier and easier, many young people nowadays lack the fundamental financial literacy of balancing a simple checking account. Before the internet, we all relied on our alphabet skills to find things, from looking up a definition in a dictionary to running our fingers down a card catalog at the library. It seemed everything was organized alphabetically. Do you remember doing research using encyclopedias? First, you would locate the correct volume. Then you would flip through the pages to find what you were looking for by the first letter. This very basic skill was much more valuable back then, and it's yet another example of how figuring things out yourself meant using brain power to first figure out where to look. The art of writing letters was a communication skill that dominated for centuries. Handwritten letters were the only way to communicate long distances before the advent of the telephone. Not to mention, it taught us patience. Letter writing was common throughout the 20th century, and it carried with it our own personal touch, showing that we cared enough to sit down and craft a message specifically for the recipient. These letters often created lasting memories that became keepsakes for some and simply strengthened connections between people. Typing on a typewriter was once part of everyone's schooling. The class taught you how to line up your fingers and then memorize the layout of all the keys, which helped to build up your typing speed. You also learned how to maintain a typewriter, which included loading in sheets of paper, replacing the ink ribbon when needed, and dusting off the type before use. This important skill was essential for most of us because typewriters were used everywhere. Typewriters also taught us to be detail-oriented, as making a mistake usually meant starting all over. In most homes of the past, there could be found a set of dishes that were only used on special occasions. The fine china would be displayed in a china cabinet year-round, right up until that very special holiday dinner or party, where the dishware transformed the ordinary meal into a memorable event. These dishes were usually passed down through the generations, but storing them and the tradition of using them on a regular basis is something that you very seldom see today. Dating the old-fashioned way was all about face-to-face interactions, genuine conversations, and getting to know someone deeply. It's a slower, more intentional approach to finding a significant other. Rather than swiping left or right on a screen, dating used to be about making a real connection with someone and understanding their values before committing. This also required us to have good social skills, manners, and good hygiene if we expected to find that special someone. Dating today is quite different because you never know what you're going to get after seeing their profile picture. There was once a time when we valued doing most things ourselves. From the simplest things, like manually rolling down a car window, it was all about the effort. We would physically go out to eat, rather than have it delivered. And we used to have to go to the bank on a regular basis, and actually go inside to deposit and withdraw money, which also meant we had to interact with the bank teller. All of these things remind us of the simple pleasures of going about our life. These manual actions were not only part of our daily routines, but they taught us to appreciate the little things that filled our lives. Remember when cooking meant pulling out those old recipe cards that were passed down through the family? Each one held a little piece of history, handwritten with notes and tweaks added over the years. Unlike today, we used to flip through a box or a binder of recipes that were a collection of our favorite dishes. These recipes were simple, made with ingredients you always had on hand, and most importantly, they reminded you of family. Not only was it about feeding your family, but it kept some of your family traditions alive. Back before microwaves became a kitchen staple, cooking was an art form that took preparation and time. There were no ready-to-eat meals from the grocery store that could be zapped and ready in seconds. Instead, you'd plan meals for the week and cook a meal each night. The stovetop and oven got plenty of use, from things like simmering, baking, and boiling a variety of foods. You really had to know your way around the kitchen, and most were taught how to cook by their mother, and also from home economics classes taught at school. While it did take longer, the meals were often healthier, made from scratch without any processed shortcuts. There was something special about that slower pace, where you could really savor the process and the results. Sending a fax was once the fastest way to send important documents from one business to another. Before email took over, fax machines were the primary tool in any office. First, you'd place your document in the machine, then dial the number, and listen for that familiar screeching sound as the fax went through. Sometimes you'd have to deal with a busy signal and try again, but it would eventually go through. Sure, the copies weren't always the clearest, but they got the job done, and there was a certain satisfaction in knowing you could send a document halfway across the world in just minutes. Doing laundry by hand not only got your clothes clean, but it was a real workout. Scrubbing, rinsing, and wringing out each item took effort, meaning many people didn't have automatic washing machines until years later. Then there was hanging the clothes out to dry on a clothesline in the yard. There was nothing quite like the fresh scent of clothes dried in the open air, crisp and sun-kissed, as long as it didn't rain. It was a much simpler time, when taking care of chores meant more than just tossing them in a machine and walking away. Sometimes you had to do things the hard way. Before Google and automatic spell check, if you wanted to know how to spell a word or what it meant, you'd have to turn to a dictionary. That big, heavy book that just about everyone owned was essential. Finding a word wasn't always quick. It meant you needed to understand how to find things alphabetically. But flipping through those pages also sometimes led you to new and interesting words along the way. Every home and classroom had one, and it was a go-to for students, writers, and anyone who needed to double-check their work. Shorthand was a skill that set you apart, especially in an office environment a few decades ago. Taking notes at lightning speed was a huge advantage, whether you were in a meeting, on a phone call, or dictating a conversation. Learning those unique symbols and abbreviations was like mastering a secret code, and it felt pretty cool to be able to write faster than most people could talk. Long before texting came along, shorthand was the original way to communicate quickly and efficiently, and it was a skill that made you a professional. Picture taking used to be way more than just tapping a button on your phone. There was a kind of special magic in knowing how to operate a 35mm camera manually, which included loading and unloading film. You had to be precise, making sure not to expose the roll to light. And once the film was loaded, every single shot mattered, because you only had a limited number of exposures. After taking your pictures, there was an excitement while waiting for them to be developed, not knowing exactly what you'd captured until the prints were in your hands. Long before Google changed the way we searched for phone numbers and reviews of businesses, the phone book was the go-to source for finding help. That big, thick book sat by the phone, ready to help you track down any contact or business you needed. Finding someone's number in the white pages was often tricky, especially if they had a common last name, so it was helpful if you had their address too. The yellow pages were the place to find a reputable business, from plumbers to pizza shops. Every business wanted a huge ad in the yellow pages, and many even named their business so that they would show up first. Think about all those businesses that were called ABC or AAA. Navigating the phone book was an essential skill that everyone used to master back in the day. At Recollection Road, I believe preserving the past is incredibly important, and our friends at Legacy Box do too. So much so, they've offered my viewers a code for 55% off. In today's digital age, analog media like VHS tapes and film reels are fading, risking the loss of cherished memories due to things like mold, dust, and time. But Legacy Box, trusted by over 1.5 million families, offers a simple and safe solution to protect your memories before it's too late. With Legacy Box, you can convert your analog treasures into digital memories effortlessly. Send your VHS tapes, camcorder tapes, and pictures to Legacy Box, and like magic, receive back your originals and digital copies for easy enjoyment, sharing, and organization. And here's the kicker. For a limited time, enjoy an exclusive 55% discount at legacybox.com/recollection. Don't let your memories fade. Preserve your past today with Legacy Box. Buy today to take advantage of this exclusive offer and send them in whenever you're ready. Go to legacybox.com/recollection to save 55% while supplies last. Before calculators became common in the 1970s, the slide rule was the tool of choice for anyone needing to do complex math. Engineers, scientists, and students all relied on this handy device to calculate everything from basic arithmetic to advanced equations. Using a slide rule took skill, requiring you to understand the math behind it and carefully move the sliders to get the right answer. Learning to use a slide rule was a rite of passage in high school, and while it has been replaced by modern technology, there was joy in understanding such a precise manual tool. Canning was a tradition that brought many families together, preserving whatever harvest they could from their garden. It was time-consuming work that included sterilizing jars, prepping food, and making sure each jar was sealed just right. But after seeing all of those jars lined up, filled with fruit, vegetables, and jams, there was a deep sense of accomplishment. It was a way to ensure you had food stored away for the winter, providing a sense of security through those cold winter months. Plus, nothing beat the flavor of homemade fruit preserves. Wallpaper was something that used to be very prevalent in homes across the country, and so that meant many people knew how to properly hang and remove wallpaper. Not only did it cover your walls, but there was a lot of technique that made every pattern match perfectly, without any wrinkles. It was a time-consuming process, from choosing a pattern to removing the old wallpaper before starting, but the result added style and expression to any room. This was one of the original DIY projects for homeowners, long before HGTV. Changing your own oil was a rite of passage for many young men. It was one of those things that you would learn from your dad, or maybe even an auto shop class at school. Not being afraid to climb under the car and get a little dirty was a satisfying feeling, especially knowing you were saving money and maintaining your engine. Changing your oil yourself was also a point of pride for anyone who enjoyed being in the garage and working with their hands. Patience was just a necessary part of life back then. Whether it was waiting for a letter in the mail, watching bread rise, or even dialing a number on a rotary phone, things just took time. And in a way, that was a good thing. It taught you to slow down, appreciate the process, and not rush through life. Patience was more than just a virtue. It was a way of life that made everything a little more rewarding in the end. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and make sure to check the description of this video for links to pick up a t-shirt and sign up for the newsletter. Thank you to our loyal Patreon supporters listed here. Visit patreon.com/recollectionroad to join the club.